Episode 2, Utah Gun Exchange podcast. Woo! It's been a hell of a week, man. Holy cow. We're fighting the good fight, man. Holy cannoli. We've had the March 24th thing going on. We've got Utah School Safety Council. Is that what it's called? Utah Safety School Council? Utah School Safety Council.
Continuity Director in the back.
USSC.
USSC.
USSC. That also
Utah
stands
School
for
Safety Council, United States Supreme Court.
Oh,
Utah
yeah.
Supreme Court.
Woo!
And Utah Shooting Sports Council.
Hey! By the way, so we'll talk about this a little later, but I talked this afternoon with Andrew Pollock, who lost his daughter Meadow in the Florida tragedy, and he mentioned that he wanted to do the Utah Shooting Sports Council radio show with us on Saturday, one of these days coming up. So he's not available this Saturday, but potentially after that. So anything else? What other big events have we had happening this week? Our shipping company's killing it.
Yep, doing well. Some really good stuff on new client acquisitions to be able to help make more money, to help divert it into furthering the cause of freedom here at UtahGunExchange.com.
Totally.
Amazing stuff happening left and right, though. Should have brought a list.
Yeah, well, the whole point of this thing is for us kind of not to have a list.
Told me to leave my list.
Yeah. And let's see, what else? So this March 24th thing, we're going to talk a little bit about it coming up. We also have been interviewing candidates for Senator Hatch's Senate seat.
Yes.
This is a cool initiative by Utah Gun Exchange going on. Also, today we have brought in Utah educators to help us get the perspective. One of the things that's also happened is really cool. This morning we had communication with BuzzFeed. So there's an awful lot of inbound questions about all the neat things we're doing. And in fact, the neatest thing that I heard this morning when I was talking to that reporter was that her mission in life right now was, this is BuzzFeed, I can't remember the gal's name, but she is researching all of the Second Amendment marches that are surfacing as a result of this March 24th, March for Our Lives. And she's found a couple around the country, but nothing anywhere near the magnitude or size of what we're doing. And, that's really comes back to us just doing community outreach, reaching out to the teenagers that their voices are not being heard, and facilitating that. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty nice to be able to have a community of engaged people already hubbed around the website and everything that is going on there. But the team's done a fantastic job pulling it all together, dealing with the hurdles, all of the bumps in the road, and getting those worked out. Completely.
Amber. We hired Amber, and she's been
fantastic human being.
A surprise, confidence, fantastic.
Yep. She fixes problems most people don't even see. She sees them, provides a solution, said, oh, there was a problem, but it's fixed.
More testimony of the great team at Utah Gun Exchange. Yep. Shall we go ahead and bring our guests tonight? Because we have some really, really important and cool stuff to talk about tonight. If our guests want to come in, please join us. These are, let's give a big shout out for Utah educators as they enter the room. Come on in. Woo! Utah educators. And the famous Casey.
That's right. I am an educator too.
Yeah.
I'll just give you bumps.
Okay.
You're a famous educator.
I am.
Yeah.
You're not.
If you want to, Mrs. News right here.
That's right. Clark says that he now holds my makeup bag and my purse while I do all my interviews.
Yeah. I love it. No
Is there
kidding.
a gun in the makeup bag?
Unfortunately,
Is there a gun in the makeup bag?
Maybe.
All right, good answer.
Maybe.
I mean, she's totally disappointed, dude. We didn't have makeup here tonight. What's going on with us?
I did.
Oh, you did. You already did
Takes
your
a lot
makeup.
of work to look this good,
Is that
man.
what you and Nick were doing up there?
Yeah, that's why I was late to the party. That's just fashionably late.
Guys, so we're sitting right next to Casey Hansen.
Yep.
Casey is a Utah educator. She's in special education. Also have with us Annie or Ann.
Just
Ann Malloy. Ann Malloy. Ann Malloy is also special education paraprofessional. And Mr. Paul Malloy, junior high history teacher.
He's the
Utah
favorite.
educators. These are the ones that are getting it done for us. A lot of stuff happening education wise as it relates to freedom, Second Amendment, who should carry, who shouldn't carry. We had this Florida tragedy. Utah Gun Exchange has come out strong. I'd say what we've done is we've put the laws in Utah to work for the education system. We also had yesterday. We had a Maryland incident where a school resource officer got involved, and did I hear somebody did pass away from that incident?
I thought
That's
the
one
shooter.
student.
Yeah.
The student shooter.
The
right.
shooter, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And one was touch and go, and one was okay, wounded but okay. I
Okay.
thought.
What are your opinions about school resource officers?
Well, you probably are aware that most high schools already have them in place.
Yeah.
It's, I think.
This is
ultimately-
Utah, like-
Yeah, in Utah, yeah. Perhaps it's a sad commentary on the situation of society in general, where we actually need armed officers in most high schools. I couldn't speak to like central Utah or rural Utah, but definitely in the city, they've all got them. They're already there.
You guys have them at your.
We do not.
Oh, your middle school, right?
Right.
It's only high school. Why is that?
Usually because the middle schools and certainly grade schools, elementary schools, you don't see that level of possible threat. That doesn't mean that the kids aren't aware of it and thinking about it, but overall, when you look at places where the students themselves are going to create the threat, it's usually not going to be in the middle school or the elementary level.
Gotcha.
Even though we're
They're
certainly
younger.
aware that grade school kids have taken weapons into a school, but it's usually not to do what we saw at the Florida high school or, other high schools.
It's more
that have
like
been-
show and tell.
Yeah.
Grandpa style.
Yeah. Right.
I remember when I was in elementary school, I remember bringing Nintendo 64 and ColecoVision for show and tell. I remember
Nice.
all the kids sitting around the TV, Donkey Kong playing,
Careful, that's dating you.
Those are the days, right?
Do you know what ColecoVision is? Changed my life. That was the thing that forced me to use eBay for the first time.
Yeah.
Brian told me about eBay. I'm like, what? You get ColecoVision on the internet? Uh-oh.
Yeah, no kidding. So, what would you guys think about having something like that, school resource officers at your operation? Do you think it would add to the culture, take away?
I know that you said that formerly we had one. We had a
We had a retired police officer that worked in our school system.
and he did carry a gun for a while, but because we have younger students as well, we have 5th and 6th grade. It didn't give them a sense of security knowing that there was an armed police officer, and so he quit carrying, but he was there. I mean, visibly carrying, I should say.
Yeah. Right.
Visibly carrying.
Oh, he was open carrying in the school.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
As a-
gotcha.
He
as a
was,
retired
like I said,
police
he was a
officer.
retired police officer.
Gotcha.
And he was brought in to help us with our discipline. Sometimes you've got discipline challenges, and he had enough training that he could come in and talk kids through their feelings and their maybe their aggressions and help really solve those problems. But because he was a retired police officer, for the first several months that he worked for us, he openly carried, as was his right. But it really did make a lot of the students nervous, and eventually the school board met and asked him if he would not openly carry, and he complied with that.
It's interesting, that is the perception that children have about, people who are there to defend them. I wonder how, because, I guess when I grew up, and we're all of similar age, I didn't view guns as dangerous or threatening or anything like that. I viewed those people that carried them usually as a source of authority and or safety.
Can I ask, did you grow up around guns?
Yes, oh yes.
See, I
oh,
didn't.
Yes.
So
Okay,
guns
you didn't
scared
tell me.
No,
Really?
Yeah, I saw someone with a gun. I backed up, and I don't know what they're gonna do. It scared me.
Tell us about your transformation from that.
Yeah. So
Because you're
yeah,
you're like packing heat everywhere. Not only that, I saw her on Fox News the other day. I thought I could see her concealed firearm underneath. I'm just kidding.
it's concealed.
No, I'm sorry, that was MSNBC. Did you go? You didn't go. You did MSNBC though, right?
I have done MSNBC.
MSLSD.
I did ABC. I did ABC Nightline. I've done CNN, Fox,
Yeah.
Trib.
See, she's
you know,
famous.
all that. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
She's on Martha McCallum. Martha complimented her hairdo. I'm just kidding.
Right. well,
As she
if
No,
you
that was
read-
me that was doing that.
If
I
you
was
read
like,
comments
look at
on
that
Instagram,
awesome looking woman out there, and I know that gal.
Easy.
If you
She's
read
spoken for.
Instagram, my hair color represents Democrats. Apparently, I look like a Democrat with colored hair.
Oh, how
Supposedly,
interesting.
I don't know why. Apparently, only Democrats can dye their hair.
Change it to a different color. Wear red next time.
Okay, yeah, I'll work on that.
There you go.
But anyways, go back to you.
If you want, we can hang like a Utah Gun Exchange voter information packet from your ear.
That would be amazing. Just wear a shirt, Utah Gun Exchange.
Okay. Yeah, tell us. I want to know because you're telling me you went from fear of firearms to wearing one.
I was all for it. It was my second year of teaching when Sandy Hook happened. And I remember exactly where I was when I heard about it. I was at one of my junior highs in West Valley, and the teachers and I were talking about, oh my gosh, what if that happened here? What would we do? And it got me thinking, what would I do? And I didn't have the answers. I didn't know where to look. I didn't know where to start looking. But my mom texted me and said, hey, there's this, protection gun type class going on over Christmas break, free for educators. You might want to check it out. Which is surprising because my mom's not 100% pro-gun. But I took the class and I went, yes. If I'm a teacher and I have to stand there and protect my kids, give me something to defend ourselves with. If I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down fighting.
You had this thought process occurred to you as someone who at this point in time you hadn't even fired a handgun or anything like that?
Right. The only times I've been around a gun was when I dated guys and they wanted to look cool around me, so they'd pull it out and show me. Ooh,
Isn't that called brandishing?
Yes.
No, not in that context.
But I'll be honest, it took me a long time to get comfortable around guns. Just because I got my concealed carry doesn't mean I was ready to go out and carry.
Completely.
And I wasn't ready to go out and defend anyone. I went to the range constantly. I took classes. My fiance is, training, the armored truck drivers, the bounty hunters, all these people. So I took every class I could. I put my hands on every gun I could. I shoot everything. I will shoot it at least once, and if I don't like it, then I can say I don't like it. But I told myself I've got to at least try and be educated.
So, this latest incident in Florida would you all say? I mean, Ann, would you say that you're seeing some similar transitions around you, like that which Casey may have experienced because of this Florida thing?
You know, I grew up with guns. I grew up, my father and his family were hunters. I mean, that was part of our access to food. And I was taught gun safety young. We taught our own children gun safety young. But I did not have the same experience. I do not want to carry.
Okay.
I don't feel comfortable of me, you know, my eyesight's not great, you know, maybe I don't want to get the training to do that. I want to get the training to be a teacher and teach my students. And knowing that Casey would, you know, when we would work together, would be in the room there, that gave me comfort because I knew she had the training. But just to have a teacher have, you know, a limited amount of enough training, just enough training to have a concealed carry, do I want that there? I don't think so. You know, understanding how you can defend, I don't know.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. So, I think what I'm hearing is that Casey's carries and comfortable and ready to utilize that, right?
I sure hope so. Yes.
And you're feeling a little less aggressive about it. You're saying, hey, for me, it's not really the right thing for me, but I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying you feel a little bit more comfortable knowing that Casey's next door.
When she was, yes.
Okay.
When she
I
was,
left her.
she left and went somewhere else. But yeah, I was. Are there other teachers in my school at this time that I would want to know if they were carrying? I guess I would want to know. I'm not sure that there are very many there that I would feel comfortable with them carrying. I mean,
Not everyone should carry a gun.
I really don't think so. I
Just
mean,
like driving, right? Not everybody should drive,
I
right?
think, you know, the education and helping have your students in a safe place and making your room safe as possible is the extent that I want for most of the teachers. Not all, but
Yeah.
That's interesting. So then, Paul, now you two are married, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And where do you come down on it then? Are you an active, well, it's up, tell us what you think about it. Are you a carrier or not? I don't know. You don't have to tell us, but
No,
I'm curious where you
I'm
come down on it.
But I will tell you this, like my wife, who grew up with guns, I did too. My father was actually a sharpshooter in the Army. And so as we were growing up, we grew up with guns. I think I was 12 or 13 when I bought a Ruger 1022. You know, kind of the great starter weapon, you know, rifle that you can have, right?
Yeah.
And as after we were married, I bought a Makarov 9mm, in part because it has cool history. I'm a history teacher. I love history. And in part because it was the right size for my hand. I have small hands. And I had tried a lot of different pistols, but I liked the Makarov 9x8, and it felt good. And the reason why I bought it, though, besides the historical value, was definitely, at the time our kids were young, I thought, you know, it made sense that that we teach them how to handle both rifles and pistols. And I had qualified. I served in the United States Air Force. I was an officer. I was in
Congratulations,
pilot
thank you.
training, and had qualified as a marksman, not a sharpshooter, but a marksman with a .38 pistol. And so I felt comfortable. I felt confident that I could definitely utilize a pistol. I take my pistol out to a range once in a while and work with it. And you know, pistols, of course, are notoriously inaccurate. And so you have to practice.
In my case, it's just a shooter.
Pistol's fine.
A pistol is fine.
Well, I'm more of the rifle guy, I guess. You know, I can't hit the broadside of a barn with my pistol. You know? And therein lies, I guess, part of the issue with training, and the fact that I enjoy taking a gun out to shoot targets. I find that having teachers, and I'll distinguish that from what you asked earlier about having safety officers who are trained in a school, that's an entirely different thing. But would I want to be armed in a shooter situation, even with the training that I've had? No. I don't know. Now, I would admit that Casey's had far more training than I have. She's been through some of the courses. I've seen that. But, with adrenaline pumping through, would I be able to actually fire a gun and take down somebody who is an active threat? For me, I would probably prefer not to have a weapon, just because I don't know where that bullet's going to go. I couldn't be 100% sure that it's going to hit the threat, as opposed to go through a wall and hit somebody else. I'm just not that confident that I could handle that in a very stressful situation.
Fair enough. It's a individual choice issue. And you guys are a great example of exercising the individual choice that educators are offered in the state of Utah. Just out of curiosity, so y'all know in Utah that if you're over 21 and you have a concealed firearm permit, then it's legal to carry inside the schools, K through 12 and also beyond. And you all are saying, hey, we get that and we're exercising our. How do you feel about that concept of that? That's a controversial concept, allowing teachers to be armed in the school. But in Utah, it's done, and we're now exercising our rights by doing free.
I think we can do it for the last 15, 20 years. I mean, it's been a long time that this has been in place. It just never came up because we don't have school shootings here.
That's right.
Maybe
Is there
it's
a reason?
Well, maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it's just because we come down on kids hard before they can act. I don't know. Maybe it's because the kids know that it's possible someone's carrying. Who knows? But going back to the school resource officer, if you told me that you would protect us and that you provided somebody who was trained in the school and was there ready to act, please, by all means, do it. I don't want to use my gun. I don't want to shoot anyone. That's gonna mess with me.
You're not Rambo?
No, and I'm not gonna go looking for anyone. Kids, stay here. I'll be right back. Roaming the halls.
She's kicking the door open. You see Casey
clearing the
You
rooms.
see that purple hair come out. her bow.
Well, you mentioned that you said you're not Rambo, and sometimes I wonder, especially with us out here in the West, how much the cowboy mentality enters into this. And I've really wondered. We've got friends, we've got family that have concealed carry. And sometimes I wonder, are you carrying because you really need to, or because it makes you feel like a cowboy?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in which case it's like, really? Yeah. What's the point?
We don't want everyone to have guns.
Yeah, carrying to be a cowboy is not a good thing. I know that personally, the people that I know that carry, they've gone through a thought process that says something like, hey, this is a responsibility, and I make sure that
you would hope
when the time comes. Well, and you would hope, and in my case, I think I'm surrounded by pretty good people, so I think that's the logic that is pervasive. But it may not always be the case. But what I've experienced is that gun owners and concealed carry holders, they're some of the most responsible people. So what do you guys hear what's the water cooler talk inside the schools?
Yeah, well, there is
about
that.
all this?
What's this water cooler doing here?
Well,
And a drinking fountain last week.
exactly.
What's going on?
The soda machine's broke.
You know, we actually had in lunch last week. We had this conversation, and it was interesting because of the half dozen or so teachers that were involved, almost everybody said, you know, I wouldn't want to trust me with a gun. In other words, they're selecting out. They're saying, I'm not interested in learning how to shoot or anything, and probably a lot for the same reasons that I've expressed. You know, it's I just don't know if, number one, I would be accurate enough to not harm somebody unintentional. Others simply said, I don't get guns, I don't understand them, but they make me nervous. You know, so there was a wide variety of the teachers that I was talking with. Without any question in my mind, I would have been the one that would have been the most qualified to have a weapon. And I'm saying, you know what? I don't know that I want that. And I look at the others, so look, I have a golf club in my classroom. I'd take the shooter on with a golf club before I'd take him on with a gun.
Hey, there's some merit to that argument, you know. If you're
Because
standing
the
in the
truth
right
is
place.
that every one of us, every single one of us said, look, if there was an active threat, we would definitely, as a teacher, we would do everything, even if that meant literally taking a bullet for our students. We would be willing to do that.
I think that right there, you hit the nail on the head. That's the difference that makes all the difference, is the love and the care that the teachers have for the children there. You can't help but, you know, you can't help, if you spend as much time around those children as you guys do, you can't help but fall in love with them. And it doesn't take very long. And when we talk about
Even the
that,
knuckleheads.
Yeah.
We love those too.
Right?
Especially those guys.
Sometimes especially.
They need extra support.
that's us.
I wondered.
Yeah. You don't need to wonder anymore.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that is the difference. You know, so I think it was for the first time in this Florida incident, we saw law enforcement take up a defensive position outside the school for whatever reason they did. They didn't raid the school. Now, what that tells me is that none of their children were in that school. Were they would have disobeyed any order and gone in to defend and save the lives of their children. And I look at the educators in Utah very, very much the same. And, you know, Sam has children in our school system. I've raised a son through it. My experience with the Utah educators has been so positive. And the Utah educators I've interfaced with, they genuinely care about my son. And that's been my experience.
I think that's pretty widespread.
I think Utah's a great place.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Home sweet
Yeah.
home.
So that's a super interesting topic. We have another topic. Do you have anything else to say about that last topic?
I'm curious as to whether the firearms policy extends to your home. So you have the Makarov, you have the 1022.
And I also now have a 30-06.
All right, things are getting better. The longer we keep talking, you'll have a full arsenal.
I know, right?
I like it.
I'm looking for that 50 caliber Browning machine gun, right?
Oh,
So are we.
Yeah.
Still around here somewhere.
there's one back there.
If anyone knows, contact Paul.
Do you feel the same way at home in terms of using those tools for defense at home?
That is a good question. Ann and I know that in our marriage, now coming on 35 years,
Congratulations.
We need to get you on Oprah, not on this show.
Holy cow. What
Haven't
advice
killed
do you
each
have
other.
for me?
You know what? No, we don't need to go there. We were in People magazine once, and it was very untruth.
that was
That's
funny.
okay. We can go
it was
on.
funny. And they and you know, it's like okay.
No, right.
Congratulations.
Anyway, but there have been twice when I have actually loaded my pistol and stayed up at the front door waiting for a possible altercation, and I was ready. I was ready. One involved a neighbor who sought sanctuary in her house, and her mom called and said, my husband, ex-husband, is angry. He may be trying to comb through and find, and under no circumstances
yeah.
will you let my daughter go with him. And I said, I'm ready.
Wow.
I'm ready. There was another incident where we thought, there could be something serious happen, and so I felt like I was ready. But, yeah, so, in the home, I do keep my ammunition separate. I keep my pistol under lock and key. My rifles are separate.
We have gun
But
locks.
we have gun locks. And again, I mentioned that we raised our kids, even our girls, to learn how to shoot and be safe with a weapon.
It's interesting because we did take them shooting, and he takes gun safety very seriously. We didn't allow our children to have toy guns because it wasn't a toy. I mean, when we got into super soakers, that ended up being a different story.
Or Nerf guns.
That's because these two are the ones using them.
Okay, there's truth there. There's truth.
But
kids.
I mean, just to have toy guns.
Let me show you what a super soaker is.
We just didn't. A gun is a real thing. A gun does real things, and certainly when they grew up and became teenagers and went and did paintball with their friends, and I mean, I know that
Guilty pleasure.
I know that became part of their life.
That is
I've
fun,
got the
isn't
gear,
it?
man.
That's crazy.
But starting out as children, they understood that it was a real thing. I think gun safety has become more predominant, especially with incidences of shooting, whether it be in schools or whatnot, or we've had family members commit suicide, and it's like,
With a gun.
it's available. What am I going to do to
Protect them.
protect?
Well, and you were mentioning before that, gun safety, of course, is paramount. Training is incredibly important. And yet, just within the last, month or so, we've had a police officer in a schoolroom where a third grader reached over and pulled the trigger on his gun, discharged in the classroom. Nobody was hurt. And then, a week or 2 weeks ago, there was a reserve police officer who was also a school teacher in San Francisco. For whatever reason, pulled his gun out and accidentally discharged it into the ceiling. It's things like, okay,
You can't fix stupid.
a little more training, a little more awareness. I don't know, but
Don't pull it out and show it off.
right.
Well, but you represent the broader population of gun owners. Those who default to the more safe side of the equation, right? So, I think in every population you have misfits, right? You have dingbats that are going to do dingbat things.
Office pops in the classroom.
Yeah. Well, let's see. They're educators, so they're probably what they're doing right now is they're visualizing their classroom in front of them, and they think, "Oh, that's that kid, and that kid, and that kid, and that kid." Those are the dingbats in the population.
Well, we usually they usually dispel all doubt, or within a matter of the first couple days. It's like, okay,
You know what you're
We know your
yeah,
type.
we start shifting them around in the seating chart so we can get them to where we can work with them a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So there's something else that's happening here in Utah that's a big deal, and that is that Orrin Hatch is retiring, and we're going to have to send somebody new off to
Right.
Washington, D.C. And the field, I guess, is pretty broad right now. I think there were 11 Republicans, maybe 4, 5 Democrats, I think, that registered. And one of the things that we're doing as Utah Gun Exchange is we're reaching out to the candidates and we're asking them to give us a rundown on their platform. Where do they stand? Where do they stand as it relates to Second Amendment type issues? All the things that we would be concerned about, our community would be concerned about. And then of course, the topic of conversation that always comes up is the Mitt Romney factor. And I'm
Front
curious.
runner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm curious what you guys think about Mitt.
I love him.
You
I'll
love
just
him.
come right out. I love
Okay,
this
hit
guy.
it. Tell us about it.
I think he's level-headed. I think he's got, some great ideas. Maybe it doesn't help, but he lives in my parents' neighborhood. He has a house in my parents' neighborhood.
That's holiday.
He's been to our house.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've
I
met
mean,
him.
I have not. I've been in the same room as him.
Oh,
But he's talked to my parents a lot. Yeah. So I mean, I'm a little biased, I guess you could say.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I'm all for him.
Okay. Great.
I like Mitt. I
Okay.
like a lot of the things he stands for, but I don't know that I have researched where he stands on guns. So I don't know. I mean, in that context, I don't know that I've researched it enough in that realm. I mean, certainly a lot of the other things that he's done, I would, yes, I'm definitely a fan of some of the things that he's done to better where he's at.
Is a candidate's position on the Second Amendment an important consideration for you guys when voting, or individually?
Yes. It is. It is, but I don't know if it's as important as other things.
yeah, I would say that, if you're weighing out where they stand all across the board, at some point you're going to say, you know what, I like 80%, and maybe he could be stronger here or she could be stronger here, but I'm willing to allow that to slide based on what else they could really do for Utah. Now, Mitt, of course, is a very successful businessman. He's, I thought that he did a great job when he tried to run for president. I think he would have made an awesome president. I look forward to hearing more about him and what he hopes to accomplish for the state of Utah if he is elected as a senator. But as you mentioned, there is a pretty wide field, and so there may be others that would have a broader stand that I would agree with. I don't lean particularly right or left. I consider myself a centrist.
Okay.
So there's still a possibility. But of course, Utah being a dominantly Republican state, it's probably, I wouldn't say a foregone conclusion, but you can kind of see the polls leaning that direction.
Oh, of course, of course. He has the name recognition
That
Yeah,
helps.
he does.
completely.
But, being the guy that kind of rescued the Salt Lake Olympics of
Yeah, I was gonna say,
2002,
didn't he make money?
he's got
He made
huge
money from the
cash with
Olympics.
his name, right?
Yeah.
He definitely made a big change there where a change was needed. So
Yeah.
Is there a deal breaker as it relates to the Second Amendment and a particular candidate for any of you? Do you support a candidate? You're talking about weighing 80 versus 20% of a message or a platform. Is there a deal breaker issue on the Second Amendment that you would say, no, I love Romney, but I'm not going to vote for him because of X, Y, or Z, or any candidate for that matter?
It definitely swayed my vote against Hillary. I'll just be honest. The fact that she was gonna.
Well, that amongst the 2 or 3 dozen other things.
Sure. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, it
added
kind
to
of
the
made.
swaying.
It made a vote a little easier on the other side.
Yeah.
And business was really good before Trump got in office.
You're right.
Wasn't it?
Well, that's something that's happened, and we hear that. Of course, see now at Utah Gun Exchange, traffic is up. Traffic has been up now, but of course that could be completely attributable to our marketing efforts. But
Sure.
yeah, but the industry as a whole has suffered ever since Trump entered office, just because people feel like
We're safe.
we're safe now. And it seems like
And
maybe
before
nothing
that-
could be further than the truth.
Yeah.
Well, I know in discussion with Clark Aposhian that he says that after every single tragedy, gun sales shoot up.
That's right.
No pun intended. And in his explanation, he says it's two things. Number one, people immediately think, oh, I've got to go out and buy a gun to defend myself, even though the likelihood of that happening is what? Maybe 10,000 to 1? Not 1,000,000 to 1, but 10,000 to 1, maybe. And then the other reason is because there's that element of the population that is worried that immediately, because of the gun tragedy, that Congress is going to clamp down some way and either try to reduce Second Amendment rights, or they're going to, of course, the fear and the fear mongering is that somebody's going to come along and eliminate the Second Amendment completely.
Yep.
And so they go out thinking that they're going to buy a gun so that they have that, and even if the law switches and say you got to surrender the guns, they won't. Okay, and so there's always that group that will go out as a reaction to every single tragedy, and so maybe gun sales are up because of that.
Yeah, it's conceivable. I remember being in a Sportsman's Warehouse down there on 72nd or Fort Union when within a day or 2 or 3 days after that Sandy Hook incident, and the wall was just empty, except
Right.
for maybe 3 or 4 revolvers up there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's what's happening right now, but for us, traffic is definitely up.
Now, you asked earlier if there was anything on any candidate that would be a deal breaker. And the way that I read the Second Amendment is maybe different than what a lot of people read, and maybe even different than how the Supreme Court actually ultimately weighed in on defining the Second Amendment, allowing then for anybody and everybody to have a weapon. And you already know I've got weapons in my
Yep.
home, okay? And you know that I trained in the military to be able to be reasonably proficient with one. And yet I am constantly at an internal debate about the idea that the Second Amendment is very specific about a well-ordered militia. And what does that
Well-regulated.
mean? Well-regulated, thank you. A well-regulated militia. And so, to me, if there was any possible candidate that said we're going to need to get rid of the Second Amendment, that would strike a wrong chord. But candidates that are thinking about reasonable ways to keep guns out of the hands of people who responsibly should not have guns, I'm willing to listen to that.
Sure,
100%.
sure.
I like
I
that.
agree.
I don't know if that makes sense.
I hear what you're saying. Yes,
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. My view is quite a bit different.
That's great.
But I appreciate you guys being here, and I want to hear what you guys think and what you have to say in this. And, so deal breakers are important, and I think it's important to calibrate, based on those things. Is there something, a lot of voters are one-issue voters, single-issue voters. My candidate needs to have this. And if they have that, that's the cornerstone on which I'll stand, and everything else can become less important. Other people look at it from a deal breaker standpoint. I was curious as to where you guys were coming from. I'd love to know what you guys believe the Second Amendment is about. You said that when you read it, your viewpoint is different than what most people might understand it to mean. Can you tell me what yours is? And you guys don't have to, but I'm curious to hear that, if you would like to.
Well, you've asked a history teacher, right?
Perfect. Excellent.
I would defer to him because I'm not as well versed as he is.
So, I mean, if you go back to when the Constitution was being written by the Founding Fathers, and I really do admire our Founding Fathers, and I think that they were inspired. I think that they were brilliant men, and I think that the months of debate that it took to put together the Constitution.
With no air conditioning.
Right.
Philadelphia
In
heat.
Philadelphia, exactly. In the summer,
Oh, yeah.
right? Yeah.
Hot,
And they
sticky.
closed the windows so that they couldn't be overheard in their discussions and debates. The Bill of Rights comes later, okay? And there was actually one of the representatives there, I forget exactly which one, but he refused to sign the finished Constitution because it had no Bill of Rights. And he says, I'm confident that we could crank this out in a matter of a few more days. Well, it took years before they finally passed the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments. And the 10 amendments are brilliant. Every word is carefully considered, and every single word is, I love the brevity, particularly of the Second Amendment. It's so specific. And when you think about it, you're talking about a time frame when the standard gun was a flintlock or cap and ball, single style breech, not breech loading, muzzle loading type of a gun. And they were fresh with the idea that they had just fought a war for freedom, for independence from their mother country. And what had saved that entirely was the concept of the local militias. And they weren't maybe trained to the level of the European armies, but they trained as best as they could. And of course, you think about Washington at Valley Forge, and he was aided by both a French military person and a German military person who came in and helped to drill the army and made them even better. So you've got that history, and now you're looking at a situation where they're saying everybody still isn't entitled to be able to have a gun. We're too young as a country to think that we might not have to do it again. And guess what? They did, 1812. They had to kind of fight to preserve their freedom. And then you think, okay, well, after that, what was going on? Well, there was a lot of westward expansion, manifest destiny and all of that. And regardless of the political correctness, which, we look at it through the lens of why did we have to push the Native Americans off their land? And usually that was at the point of a gun. But on the flip side of that, of course, as farmers went out to claim land, there wasn't anybody to pay. So they'd go out and claim the land, and sometimes the Native Americans were very threatened by that and threatened then the settlers, the colonists. They needed a way to defend their families. So it still makes sense. By the time that we get into, World War I, where we're talking about, yes, the United States has an army. Yes, we have a Marine Corps. Yes, we have a Navy. Yes, we've got a standing and trained military. At that point, how important is it for every single citizen to still have a gun? Well, if you think of the possibility, and this is historically accurate, that every country that has had a government that first disarmed the citizens, what usually happened next?
Oppression.
Exactly. So there still
And extermination.
could go that far.
The greater atrocities.
Right.
So, and that's what I say on a regular basis, is that we're preventing the greater atrocity by preserving the Second Amendment. It's not just about personal self-defense. It's about saving a society, preserving life as we know it.
I think
That's what you're
as
keying
long as a
into.
government knows that we have the right to actually overthrow a misguided government, and we can do that because of the Second Amendment, then the Second Amendment becomes a critical piece. And yet there's that internal debate. I told you I've got guns, and yet I wonder, do I want every American citizen to have a gun? No way. No way. There has to be some kind of reasonable, logical restriction.
To me, that restriction, the line on that restriction comes down to how they behave when they get behind the wheel of a vehicle.
It's an interesting idea.
Because when you get out on the
Don't
road,
arm the guy that's going to give you a middle
lose their
finger salute,
brains,
right?
If you can't drive a car, you sure better not be getting one of these things, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it does.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good insight on how you view it. What I took from that is that it was relevant then, it's relevant now, and it's an important deterrent to a tyrannical government from becoming, or it's a deterrent from a government from becoming tyrannical, and it's a check mechanism in case there's an imbalance that develops. I agree with all of that.
Yeah. Oh, I was talking to somebody today about this concept. Oh, it was one of the prospective senators that came in for Hatch's seat. We were talking about, I think he was talking about the Chinese or the Japanese had made a decision that, you were not ever going to be able to invade any portion of mainland USA or anything like that because it was just impossible because of the Second Amendment.
Yamamoto. There
Yeah.
would be a rifle behind every blade of grass.
There you go.
The same reasoning was utilized by the Nazis after meeting with the Swiss. They essentially said to the Swiss defenses, "What would you do if we attacked you?" And they said, "Well, how many men are in your military?" They gave an answer, and they said, "Well, our population is half of that, so probably everyone would shoot twice and go home." That's the paraphrase version.
I love it.
There was probably some accent involved and better grammar, but it's the same concept.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about Mullen Labe? I mean,
Mullen
isn't
Labe.
that essentially the same concept?
Well, come take them.
Yeah.
Meaning you can't come take them
You-
unless
yeah.
you come take them.
Come take them.
You take them by force.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's the spirit. It's the spirit that we will not relinquish without a fight.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
That's kind of how I feel with teaching.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down doing the best I can.
well, it's said that eternal vigilance is the price for freedom. And going back to Mullen Labe, that story is very old, going back to the ancient Greeks, Spartans, and the various Greek cities that were there fighting the Persians, which were a tyrannical force. So
Sure.
it's become a popular rallying point for many people who are Second Amendment and strong Second Amendment supporters. I love it.
Yeah.
A lot of Utah Gun Exchange fans love it because it simplifies and makes a bold statement in a very brief way, talking about brevity of the Bill of Rights, especially the Second Amendment. It seems that when truths are self-evident, you don't have to talk about them as much.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
Well, and we've faced some uphill battles this week. We've been planning our event for the March 24th March for Our Lives, and we've been excluded. They've been calling the police on us. So maybe you guys aren't familiar with the whole thing, but this March for Our Lives was originally supposed to be a march to call out for the security, safety, and protection of the children. It was a call to the adults. Hey, it's time to make a change, guys, right? And anyhow, we've been working with those guys trying to get a place to send our message because we have the same message, we're supporting. We came out with the free concealed firearm permit classes for educators. We're doing that. We're going to continue to
So
do
are
that.
you doing another one?
April 7th.
April 7th, 9 a.m.
April 7th, 9 a.m. That class is open to all educators and loved ones, free to educators, $50 to loved ones, and we're going to take that financial contribution or that economic contribution that the loved ones make and contribute that to BCI for fees.
Nice.
So we're working with the state right now to try and get those BCI fees waived for educators, but they love their fees.
Of course.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love money?
Well, and then these,
The government?
I mean, yeah, the greediest of them all, right? Like I said, look, they don't need to be taking your money. I mean, it's their money that goes to you, that goes back to them.
Right.
No, thank you.
Right.
Ponzi scheme. Anyway, but that's something that's been on my mind a lot this week because I've been working with Amber on our March 24th parade march, and we're facing obstruction from people whose message is gun control. Let's disarm. I mean, if you ask them, they'd say Second Amendment. Let's just get rid of it.
Some would, for sure.
You know, and what I've realized as we've gone through this experience is that those are the people that need us the most. They kind of know not what they do, you know. Like you used that great example in every case in history where the government has disarmed its citizenry has resulted in something worse happening, all the way leading to, you know, civilizations almost being wiped out. And so what I've realized is as we you know, have exchanges with these folks, and you know, they really fight against the Second Amendment. They hate it. They don't want. They feel threatened by it. Why do you need these kinds of guns? You know.
I think it's a lack of education. I was terrified of guns until I took courses and I got out there and I practiced and I forced myself to learn about what I was afraid of, and then I could come to the conclusion, if I'm still afraid, then okay.
Okay.
But teach me first, and then let me decide.
So you're just
Does that
open.
make sense? Yeah.
You were just open to it. And
Yeah.
would you say that it's matters of opinion that convinced you, or was it just simple, sensible fact?
I got a lot of anti-gun opinions when I first went on the news 5 years ago. A lot of people were angry at me. I may or may not have lost my job because of it.
That's right. I've heard some things like that.
You know, this is a fire at will state, so it was never out there to say this is why.
That's right.
But the events leading up to it all point that direction, right?
Yeah.
And so
There
I
was
got
a certain
lot
union
of
that should have
pushback.
defended you that didn't.
Yeah.
Yes.
I got a lot of pushback, but I still stand for what I believe in because I'm educated and I know this is what I want.
So you see that what I'm talking about in the sense that those who would reach out and say, hey, look, sensible gun control is a sensible thing to impose, and really it's not.
Right.
And we don't even know what that means anyway. But you know, I guess from my vantage point, it's become a very powerful feeling for me this week that, you know, those people who would seek to disarm us, those are the people that need us the most, because we're the ones on the front line. We will defend their lives, you know, and they will choose to yield their personal defenses to another, and that as gun owners and as supporters, we have a responsibility to them to say, that's fine, we will protect and defend you.
Well, certainly. I mean, when you think about, again, going to a good historical example of when somebody was asked, you know, do you agree with that person? I said, no, I don't agree with them, but I will defend their freedom of speech
100%.
to my death, right? Okay, and I'm paraphrasing that, but so, yeah, I get what you're saying. I think, though, that those of us who are Second Amendment supporters, in whatever level that may be, we need to be careful that we don't cast people who have a different opinion as enemy. I think that does us a disservice.
I agree.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
But I also think that we need to be careful, because when you look at extremists on either side, they're still extremists.
That's right.
Okay, and extremism on either direction can be very dangerous.
And we see it on both ends of the spectrum.
Right. So, you know, it's like, you know, is there a logical reason to say that bump stocks should be against the law? Is there a logical reason that said bump stocks should not be against the law? You know, that certainly, I think you mentioned earlier that there's room to explore that, because there's a lot of things that we don't know yet. You know, what is reasonable? Well, that's going to be a broad spectrum in and of itself, right? Some people are going to say handguns are not reasonable. whereas rifles are, shotguns are. Some are going to say an AR-15 is not reasonable, but a 30-06 single bolt action is reasonable, right?
Sure.
There's going to be others that are saying, no, you're fine with all of that, but automatic weapons in the general populace probably isn't a good idea, okay? So when you look at trying to define reasonable, there's a lot of squishy room in there, okay? But usually where you really run into problems is when you get an extremist versus an extremist. And I would dare say that we're talking about 95% of the population can be actually pretty reasonable if you can figure out where the common ground is.
Completely agree. And so it's basically the extremists that are driving the discussion.
They're screaming,
Yeah.
right, gets the most attention.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I was. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about. In the sense that
You said it well.
yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Edit that part out.
There's a major
derailed.
opportunity for people to reconsider on this issue.
Yes, I agree.
There is a reason that activist groups, as has happened here locally, with a Washington, D.C. based organization, set up shop locally to take advantage of the high emotions after the school shooting in Florida. And there's a reason that happens. People act irrationally when their emotions are high. There's a reason that strategy is employed. That is to get people to act irrationally based on an issue associated with their rights. But there is a massive opportunity for people to reconsider what they currently believe and or feel to be the case. You're a history teacher.
It has to be presented in a way that makes sense.
Absolutely. It has to be presented in a way that's not threatening. One of our missions here at Utah Gun Exchange is to engage people that would otherwise feel excluded from owning a firearm, from getting trained, for multiple reasons. One of which is they feel it's a tight-knit community and that they're not allowed in. It's a bunch of angry white men, and they're not a part of that club, so they can't be involved. We're here to let them know that's not the case. We want all people who want to shoulder the responsibility to not only defend themselves, but those they love and care about. We're here to help them and welcome them to the fold, because it's not our Second Amendment, it's everyone's Second Amendment. It's everyone's right. The right to defend is a natural law, and the Second Amendment describes part of that concept, but not completely. And we hope to engage people in a way that is non-threatening, in fact, that is inviting, so that we can grow this. Because what happens when a populace is disarmed?
We know.
Right, oppression.
Oppression.
Yep.
Yeah.
And millions of lives, or hundreds of millions of lives, are lost. And in the meantime, if somebody, no matter what we do here today, if there's a teacher in a classroom with a firearm prepared to defend their students,
The key word
As
being unprepared.
prepared as the last line of defense, and the perpetrator were to enter that classroom, and the teacher can do something as a last line of defense to stop it, versus not, I think we're going to be better off when there's the opportunity for people to take that responsibility and shoulder that responsibility and do something about it, as opposed to not have that choice. You said that you would fight to the death to defend someone's First Amendment right. We feel as passionately about the entire Bill of Rights and
Of
beyond.
course.
Yeah.
But
But we want to present that message in a way that's non-threatening and again that's inviting, because we are going to be doing a surviving active shooting situation class, and it's going to be geared toward everyone. It's going to be everyone's going to be invited within certain segments, so we can block this out. We can't have the whole state of Utah fit in one classroom. But political affiliation will be irrelevant. The one thing that people have to have in common is they have to be interested in defending themselves and those they love and prepared to take action to do so. That's without a firearm. That's a mental preparation. And one of the reasons we're doing that is to help invite people into this message or into this this idea that they're not excluded, they are invited. Because the extremism in every situation can galvanize a base of extremists and alienate everyone in the middle, so nothing happens. People are afraid if they take action, they're going to be shamed one way or the other. We want to put an end to that. We want to help move this thing forward.
Love it.
Well, very skillfully wrap things right back around to the beginning. Nicely done.
We're
That's
fans
a
of that.
well-written paper, sir.
It's the teleprompter right there,
I give you
actually.
an
Did I sound like I was reading that? You want a cough drop, Brian?
No,
Oh, okay.
I'm dying over here. I don't know if it's.
I will tell you
Dry air or
that
what,
one of
but-
the things that I'm really worried about, and I mean really worried about, is that at some point, possibly in the very near future, some unhinged teacher will brandish a firearm as a way of putting a student or a set of students in their place, and that will be seen as
That'd be
a deal breaker for that kind of, it could just do tremendous amounts of damage. And sadly, I think that we're going to see it sooner or later.
Yeah.
I think that's going to happen.
It's entirely possible that and everything else can happen, but you could have someone who is anti-gun, claim to be pro-gun,
Yeah,
go through
I
the
suppose
entire
that's a
process and
possibility
say, I'm going to
too.
take one for the team.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go act in such a manner that I can be used as the tragedy that won't go to waste, so we can use this to leverage against gun rights. That's entirely possible.
That might be prophetic. I don't.
Well, we think a lot about these things. In Israel, there are teachers that are armed, and this is not a new thing. And they don't have the problems that a lot of people are pointing out as possible problems. I'm not sure who said it. Maybe it was Mark Twain who said, of all the problems that I've had in life, most of them never happened. Or I've had many problems in life, most of them never happened. I think that relates to speculation about, allowing people the freedom to, bear arms, essentially, whether that's open or concealed.
You bring up Israel, but Israel, your mandatory military service, everybody is required to have a gun, and that's a far cry because they're in constant threat from their neighbors. You compare that to, say, Canada, which has a set of gun control laws. They still have guns, but they have gun control laws, and you balance that out and you say, okay, so we have very low problems in Israel. We have very low problems in Canada. Again, it's like, okay, are we saying that this situation works because they're being trained and this situation works because they don't require any training? I don't know. That's something to think about.
It absolutely is something to think about. What it does show, though, is that there's the possibility for things to be handled responsibly.
Yes.
And I remember when Florida was starting to issue concealed firearm permits, the headlines were essentially that there's going to be rolling gunfights in the streets, and every road, every fender bender would erupt into a gunfight, and the scenarios were endless, and that's my point. There's a possibility for it to go wrong. There's a possibility for it to go right, and there are already models that are proven to show that it can go right.
Great discussion, guys. I'm still alive over here.
I'll take your job if you
We have. Well,
I'll cover you.
you'd have to ask him first. I don't know. You're a little bit nicer than I am, though. I mean,
Cuter too.
yeah, he might enjoy seeing you in the morning.
Well, yeah, who doesn't? I can make junior high kids smile. Come on
He
now.
sees me coming. Just that Brian again.
It's okay. She can make him cry too.
There you
right.
go.
Depending on the day.
That's right. Don't mess
There
with
you
me.
go. Well, Casey, Paul, Ann, thanks for coming in tonight.
Yes.
Sam,
Thank you.
had another great conversation on the couch here in the warehouse. It's an interesting set, isn't it?
It's kind of fun.
It's fun. Yeah, we love it. And
I hope it was
for-
helpful.
Absolutely. Well,
look, your perspectives are fantastic, and I think that's
incredibly
what
valuable.
the audience is looking for right now. We're looking to get information, and we didn't get to a lot of the topics we wanted to talk about, but we got a lot of quality information, and people are curious. People are curious right now, and there's a lot of I think there's a lot of deep thought going on around the country right now about how to manage this situation, and particularly in Utah, we haven't had this happen, and there may be reasons why. So let's keep it that way. We hope to have you guys back soon. Thank you so much, and thank you for being fantastic contributors to our children. And again,
Yes.
and it's just such a giving thing that you guys do. Yeah, it's a thankless job a lot of times. Yeah.
It's a dirty
But
job.
the thing is you have parents out there like myself, like Sam. I have spent so much time with teachers in IEPs and things like that. And I have never experienced anything but the most quality people that are educating my son and the people I love in my family. You the same, Sam?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Utah is a great place. Thank you for everything you do for our kids.
Oh, you're quite
Yes.
welcome.
Yeah.
All right. And that's a wrap on episode 2, Utah Gun Exchange out.
Ooh.
To all those in Second Amendment deprived states, if you're reading this, you are the resistance, and we are with you. The nation's patriot marketplace. Buy, sell, trade. UtahGunExchange.com.